Okay, now that I've actually thought about it, this is technically the last Tuesday episode of 2023, and I don't even know how to feel about that. All I know is that I'm supposed to be discussing a show that's mostly about throwing a bunch of blame, maybe calling out one or two things for being a little bit fake, but just kind of going against the thing that guys are usually known for, which is accountability and, just throwing a bunch of blame around. So in other words, this episode lacks accountability, but interestingly enough, actually sends accountability in the right directions. Like, I may not be the best at accountability on this episode, but since I'm a guy, I'll at least direct it to the right places, But before I can get into all of that, I need to start by bringing in some particularly interesting news that happened sometime last week, where Pope Francis recently approved in a formal ruling that the priests can bless same-sex couples. Which is absolutely wild, and especially if you're Christian, this is a particularly interesting time to be alive. But at the very least, it allows me to determine how many Catholics out there by singing the song, "If you're Catholic and clap your hands."
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Or butt cheeks, if you're into that kind of thing for the same sex. But anyways, let me just read this story real quick so that I can get into the entire thing. So it says, and I quote, Pope Francis formally permitted Roman Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples on Monday in a significant shift in Vatican doctrine. The blessings may be carried out providing they are not part of regular church rituals or liturgies, nor at the same time as a civil union, according to a Vatican document approved by the Pope. The latest ruling fleshes out the opening the Pope made to blessing same-sex couples last October and marks a shift away from a 2021 ruling from the Vatican Doctrine Office which barred any blessing, saying God, quote-unquote, cannot bless sin, end quote. Okay, this could probably be one of the biggest shifts that the Catholic Church has done over the past, maybe 50 years. And not only does it seem particularly left, no pun intended, but it just seems very, very wild that an entire church organization like the Catholic Church can decide, fuck it, we are going to bless same-sex couples. Now, fortunately, there was someone who decided to comment and gave a pretty good breakdown of the entire thing. So they said, and I quote, "Before you misinterpret this headline, read what the Vatican News has put out. Anyone whose relationship with God is clouded in sin can ask for a priest's blessing. It shows that they're trying to reach out to God, and priests shouldn't turn them away for that." In the same way, Pope Francis is saying that if a same-sex couple comes to a priest and asks for a blessing, the priests shouldn't turn them away or refuse to bless them. He should instead acknowledge that those asking for a blessing are reaching out to God, and a blessing is a way to extend the Lord's love and mercy to them. But priests have to be careful that this blessing does not resemble the kind of blessing in a marriage rite, and nothing can be part of the blessing that will be construed as or give the appearance of marriage, e.g. wedding garments, candles, etc. The blessing does not mean the priest is blessing the same-sex union. Rather, by such a blessing, the Pope is encouraging priests to be pastoral in reflecting Christ's love and upholding the sanctity of marriage as God ordained it. End quote. Okay, this gives a little bit more context to things. It kind of kills a lot of the jokes that I was about to make. Although, at the same time, with priests, like this whole concept of giving blessings, I've never entirely understood it. I don't know, maybe it's because I just didn't grow up in the Catholic Church, so getting a blessing from a priest has never really carried, weight to me at least. Because for someone to tell you, may peace be with you, it sounds like just one of those things that you'd expect any religious person to actually tell you. Or at least that's what I usually tend to think that, a blessing sort of sounds like. But all in all, the weirdest part about it is usually that, to most of the people in the Catholic Church, maybe 99.9% of it, it's usually the priest saying, may the peace be with you. But when it shifts to the little kids, more so the young guys that tend to be altar boys, it becomes, may my penis be with you. Either way, not my religious denomination to really give too much of a damn about. I just have a podcast that I do, and I like making jokes on it and shit. And I probably should have started it in a less than religious manner with a little bit more pizzazz by saying, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, a podcast where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who probably might not end up being Catholic anytime soon. just by virtue of the fact that I have taken some very, very nasty shots at them over these past 2 weeks, I don't know if a priest will look at me the same. Although then again, they don't look at 9-year-olds the same, but that's besides the point. He's a man who believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This episode should have been started off a little bit better, especially since it's the final Tuesday episode of the year. Granted, I think it allows some things that were in 2023 to be left in 2023, because there's some things that definitely should be carried over and some things that should be dropped. But that's sort of besides the point. This episode isn't about things that we're leaving or carrying over from 2023 to 2024. There's a lot of accountability and blame that I'm going to be dealing with on this episode. But before I can get to that, I wanted to discuss two things first before I can go into the main topic. So first of all, this one's more of an update. So if you guys remember, I did the episode where I started off talking about Ruby Rose and how there was a guy who had been paying for her OnlyFans and had spent over 60,000 US in a month and 90k total, if I'm not wrong, in dollars. So a couple of days I noticed that he had gotten onto the No Jumpers podcast, and also another YouTuber had gone to sort of, just check out some of his details, and apparently the story itself was fake. So the guy just met up with Ruby Rose, and Ruby Rose's team asked him to take a photo with her and shit. And I think they paid him, I think it was like $15,000-$20,000. And they pretty much decided to take this story, make it into a thing, and run it for a while. No one really knows the reason why they would choose to do that. But all in all, the story itself was a hoax. And considering that no one was smart enough to make him sign an NDA, now it's out there. So I just figured I should update you guys. Now, with that said, I want to move things on and go to the very wonderful Republic of Uganda. Now, about a month ago, there was a report that was made where the Bank of Uganda banned banknotes or money as gifts, or at least, how they were being sent as gifts. So the story reads, and I quote, "The trend of florists designing bouquets from banknotes became popularized in recent months in the country. It became even more prominent in the lead up to this year's national examinations as parents and guardians gifted these bouquets to their candidate children to wish them success. But the central bank warned that such practices constitute mutilation and defacing and compromise the integrity of the Uganda shilling currency, which is illegal." The bank spokesperson Kenneth Agesa said, and I quote, "Florists, designers, gifting stylists, and their clients are particularly cautioned to avoid using currency, banknotes, and coins in making bouquets or any like creations. This mainly involves the use of brand new banknotes that are stuck together using glue, sellotape, pins, clips, and other adhesives or fasteners as part of floral bouquets for various social events and gifting ceremonies. This practice destroys the utility of banknotes, making them unusable in cash processing and distribution equipment such as cash counting machines and ATMs, which are a critical part of the cash distribution system. It also results in the premature withdrawal from circulation and replacement of banknotes at an avoidable cost to the public." End quote. The Bank of Uganda's statement comes weeks after the Ministry of Education also issued a warning to parents about these cash gifts to their candidate children. The Minister for Higher Education warned that this might demoralize other learners whose parents cannot afford such gifts. The minister promised to work with the Bank of Uganda to give guidance on this practice. The central bank said in its statement that although it is not against using cash as a gift, this exchange should conform to the normal use of currency to facilitate payment transactions. End quote, and end of story. Now, here's the thing, alright? I feel like if you're a parent and you're doing this for your kid, then there's a certain sense of flexing that you're doing, which honestly, I'm glad I'm not your kid, because it would actually really suck for me, at least in the long run. Because if you're doing that to sort of flex and show that you have money, and I'm not saying that, oh, you're going to lose money, blah, blah, you'll get poor, but one of the things that you realize whenever you make money, however much money you make, you always realize that there's always going to be someone who has more money. And if you're doing shit like this to show that you have money, then clearly you might be having a bit of an insecurity. Granted, there's also the comparison side of things, and you might be trying to show that you're better than the other person, but when has that ever gotten most people far ahead? And all in all, if you're doing this and your kid is doing national exams, now when your kid becomes an adult and tries to do the same thing, yet they probably might not have the same money, how exactly are you going to make it easier for them to survive in a world where they have nothing to flex with? I don't know. Maybe it's just a me thing. But all in all, I feel like these sorts of gifts are mostly used on dates and maybe for weddings, not necessarily the national examinations, which honestly, if we can ditch them, I would be so happy. I feel like there's a massive waste of money in doing this, and frankly, there's other ways to give expensive gifts than trying to decorate a flower with a bunch of money. Although also, when I kind of think about it, it does kind of show us something particularly interesting with the Bank of Uganda, because it's against these gifts because it mutilates money, but it doesn't mean that you can't find ways of giving a lot of money the right way. So of course, if it's a wedding, then you can get something that is probably useful in the household, or you can buy them a house. No one's saying that you shouldn't. If it's a romantic date or something nice for your partner, you can go and buy them some shit like perfume or like a trip to go somewhere or some shit like that, or even a spa date. But if throwing money is really your thing and you live by the rules of Juicy J, where bands will make her dance, then the very best way that you can gift someone is taking them to a strip club. Because guess what? You can throw money like that in the same exact way, but unlike the case of the floral money, this one won't be mutilated. Maybe by pussy, but that's not really mutilation per se. All in all, what I'm trying to say is, the government in this case may not seem like they are anti-romance, but what they can definitely show you is they are very pro-stripper. All in all, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of today. Now, if you're a guy and you're above the age of, 21, you realize that one of the things that a lot of women usually like to complain about is how the current set of guys aren't all that great. Apparently, the older guys, the men that existed during their fathers' times and all, they were nice, they knew how to treat a woman right. And the vast majority of the guys that are there today don't know how to do any of that shit. And they don't treat women all that nicely. And a lot of us have heard these things quite a bit. And half the time, we usually tend to think that they're just making their noise and they'll go back to their guys, which they normally do. But sometimes we see posts on Reddit about them that make us want to question if the problem is the batch of guys that they're going for or that they're attracting, or if it's a greater guy thing. Either way, this time I decided to try and generalize it and assume that, this is probably an issue with every guy, because the person that made the post claimed that it's this new set of guys, which I'd like to think I am a part of this new batch of guys that has existed on this planet for anywhere between 20 and 30 years, so that at least I can explain where most of these issues with this new batch of guys is coming from. So the post itself is titled, "Can we talk about the new set of guys?" And it says, and I quote, "As a babe, I'm really concerned about the new generation of guys. I think the likes of Akina Andrew Kibe and Andrew Tate have really destroyed the minds of our boys. These current men want to be babied so much. For instance, I'm in campus, and there's this one time this guy took me out on a date. It was more of a hangout though, since we're not romantically attracted to each other. But now the problem is, after the date he asked me when I'm going to take him out. I really hate this new batch of men. They are far from being gentlemen. Can I also add that they want to have sex with you immediately after the date? Man, I was so pissed." End quote. Okay. So while I do want to get into this entire thing and sort of break down where all of these issues are coming from, if Andrew Kibe and Andrew Tate are really behind this, I first want to start by asking a bit of a question, because I was a little bit confused when I was looking at this post. Was the issue of the dude not being a gentleman because he asked if you would take him out sometime, or was it something else? Because that's exactly what it seemed like. When you're busy saying that, the problem is after the date he asked me when I'm going to take him out, and then you proceed by saying, I really hate this new batch of men that are far from being gentlemen, does the fact that he was asking you to pay for a bill, which doesn't even exist yet, make him less of a gentleman because he asked you to pay for a bill that doesn't even exist yet? I don't know. it seemed a little bit wild. Personally, I don't want to jump to any conclusions about this entire thing, but all in all, I feel like that one's a little bit wild for me. Personally, I make jokes like that all the time whenever I'm with women, and I'll always talk about equality and feminism and how they should be handling the bills, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, besides the point, now, the whole talk about Andrew Tate and Andrew Kibe influencing a lot of young guys, I've heard this talk a lot, and honestly, I feel like for a vast majority of guys, they haven't really done too much quote-unquote damage to them, and the influence that they've had on their behaviors is probably anywhere from 10 to at max maybe 30%. For the most part, yes, these guys will talk a lot on the internet, but there's the stuff that they'll say that applies to the ground, which some guys can implement, some can't, and if it's not a part of their personality, then making those changes is a little bit harder than quite a lot of people would like to think. So to say that Andrew Tate and or Andrew Kibe have influenced these guys to start acting a certain way, then you can sort of be right to a degree, but there's a lot of that behavior, there's a lot of that character that is built by the environment around them. It's not just what they consume, but also the environment around them does affect it quite a lot, which is why I decided to look at all the things that she claimed, are making this new batch, this new set of guys so ungentlemanly, if you can call them that, and I can break down exactly where it comes from so that I can throw the appropriate blame when necessary. Alright, so as per the post, the first thing that she claimed was messing up this new batch of guys is the fact that they want to be babied so much. So the babying, can I really say that it came from Andrew Kibe and Andrew Tate? Not exactly, but even though you try to put a little bit of blame there, I feel like most of the blame is split between our mothers today and the regular expectations that guys have. And I'll even just clarify the regular expectations that guys have, in that for most guys, a good relationship will allow you to be a boy. Like, if you're in a good relationship with a babe, if you're in a great relationship, yes, you're the man, yes, you're the leader, but in the privacy of the two of you guys being together, there is a certain essence of babying that's just going to be there by default. Not necessarily because, we want our mothers or some shit in our wives, but mostly just because that's just how guys are. Like, the whole boys will be boys thing, it's usually guys doing a bunch of dumb shit that you'd expect like 5, 6, 7-year-old kids to be doing. A lot of the dumb stuff that we do as grown men when we're just as boys is because we're comfortable enough to do dumb shit and look like actual small children. Now, if we do not have that level of freedom and vulnerability with you as our babe, then there's a very good chance that we probably don't care about you all that much, or we don't value you to the point where we believe that we can actually release that more vulnerable side of ourselves. It's kind of like the whole lady in the streets, freak in the sheets kind of thing. A lot of babes will be expected to be this strong, upstanding, independent, good-looking woman, but when they're in the bedroom, like, shorty wants her hair pulled and she wants to be talked to like shit, yet out here in the streets she wants to be treated with respect, and she wants to be referred to as Madame and Mrs. or Miss by the people around her, and she wants to be treated with the utmost level of respect. So that sense of duality exists in women, but it also exists in men as well. And our mothers, of course, they will obviously baby us, they will treat us really well. There's a reason why we love our moms, us boys. And whether you want to call us mamas boys or not, at the end of the day, we love our mothers, they treat us great. So with that said, the next one that was mentioned was being taken out, the whole handling the bill and everything. And this one, I will throw the blame on feminism, equality, and reality. Now, I am going to start by blaming it on equality because guess what? Especially when you're in campus, like in this particular situation, y'all are usually, most times, not too far from being broke. So, if I'm pretty much broke and you're pretty much broke, you expect me to go and take myself further down into brokenness or further deeper into brokenness while you retain whatever financial capabilities you have because I'm a gentleman? Bitch, what? Like, think about it for a second. You have money, I have money. It's not like I get more money because I'm a guy. It's not like you get less money because you're a babe. At the end of the day, we all get a little bit of money here and there as pocket money or as an allowance so that we can, go to school and eat and do a couple of other things that young people do. So for me to expect that you'd be able to hold up your end of a bill or even be able to sort out my bill if I'm sorting out yours, is that a little too much to ask simply because I have a penis and you have a vagina? At the end of the day, men were doing it back in the day because women didn't have access to funds. Now women have access to funds and they have opportunities, hell, sometimes even more opportunities than guys to access those funds, and they're still saying that they want the guys to, use up their funds. Like, that shit don't make sense at all. So for the most part, especially considering that you're not romantically involved with this guy, the fact that you expect that he should quote unquote be a gentleman and pay for every bill whenever you guys go out together, I think is just you being selfish and not wanting to use up your money, which honestly is a bit stingy, and I honestly think that some women should just stop this bullshit. But that said, the next one is quote unquote ungentlemanly behavior. I'm just taking this one from the whole talk of, men aren't gentlemen, which, you could argue it a couple of different ways. Guys aren't, rushing to open the door for the woman. It's not like they are trying to talk to a lot of women with a lot of respect nowadays. There's a lot of things that I can generally classify as ungentlemanly behavior that I see a lot of guys portraying. And the reasoning, or at least where I can throw a lot of the blame for that, actually will fall to our fathers and or lack thereof. Now, granted, I know there's a lot of guys who have dads who still treat women like shit, and you can blame that partially on the father, but you can also blame it on the fact that some fathers are fathers because they birthed you, but they're not particularly present. Even though they stay in the same house with you, they don't try to teach their young sons shit, and as a result, these guys will be picking up stuff on how to be a man. They will be picking up the pointers on how to treat women, how to talk to women from other places, and sometimes it can just be the neighborhood around, of which certain neighborhoods will have certain behaviors that, some of the random people around there will sort of have, and that can affect how you end up treating the opposite sex. And that's a very unfortunate reality, and a lot of guys go through that, and they end up not knowing how to talk to a woman properly because they weren't taught how to talk to a woman properly by the person that got their mother pregnant with them. Or maybe they were taught, they learned, or they saw their fathers doing it, but in the worst places, and these guys did the most degenerate work in terms of talking to women. So for example, in a bar, if they were trying to talk to a hoe or some shit. But all in all, that one you can blame some of it on our fathers or lack thereof. But yes, the Andrew Kibes and the Andrew Tates could probably also take some blame for this. Now, last but not least, there's quick sex, which, to be very honest, the whole quick sex thing, that one I'll mostly blame it on the women because they control the access to sex. And yes, you can throw it around and say, oh, like the pickup artist and they started teaching guys blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, if a woman doesn't open her legs to you, then it's rape. And for the most part, there's a lot of women who've opened their legs pretty quickly for the wrong guys and for the right ones, and that has resulted in this particular scenario. Because the thing with guys is we usually evaluate risks, all right? Like, we will not take certain risks if we do not see a pretty good possibility of reward that's there. For example, there's not that many guys, particularly in this part of the world, that will just straight up ask their girlfriends for an open relationship. They would much rather go and cheat in secret and possibly risk being caught than go to their woman and be like, look, I really love you, really care about you, but I'm interested in sleeping with other women, in a non-emotionally attached way. Is there a way that we can open this relationship or this marriage? There's very, very few guys that can actually go and do that because there are very few men that have tried. And from that very tiny number, there's an even tinier number that have gotten an approval for it. So for the most part, they would much rather continue doing that shit and, just trying to keep it under wraps so that their partner doesn't find out and it starts causing them issues at home. But now you think about quick sex and the idea of guys trying to sleep with you on the first date, guess who allowed that shit to happen? It's women. But they did it for a couple of guys, and considering that number of guys has actually increased over time, there's more and more guys who believe that they can go ahead and actually take a babe out on a date and try to bang them on the first date, and they will get a positive result. That shit would not have existed if women did not allow that shit to happen. So this one, we have to blame it squarely on the women, and however it is you want to direct the blame after that, at the end of the day, the original source of this problem is the women and the fact that they allowed this shit to happen. But to kind of conclude all of this, let me just say that for all of us as people, we are built by the societies that we're a part of. We may like some behaviors and characteristics and not like others, but at the end of the day, we are built by the societies that we are a part of and by the content that we consume. Now, of course, you can argue that guys have gotten arguably worse in terms of how they treat women today, in some cases, and you'd probably be correct, but at the same time, it's not like it's happened out of the blues, it's not like it hasn't been leading to it, and it's not like it came out of nowhere. So maybe we need to start looking at where the root causes are, and maybe even though we might not be able to fix the current generation, maybe the next 1-2 generations we can make the right changes and actually shift things in the right direction. All in all, I do want to hear your thoughts on this. So on IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. And on Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Happy belated Christmas, I guess. And I wish you the very best of the festive season. And I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.